please take your seats. If you're curious about the next session, choose Europe for Science. It is just past 2:30, so it is time for this next panel discussion, which is, as I said, is all about choosing Europe for science. Scientific freedom, as we discussed earlier, is coming under severe pressure in other parts of the world. Every day we see a different headline about funding cuts, about threats and about restrictions. And we also heard just yesterday the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen mentioning in her speech that in times like this is actually an opportunity for Europe, to choose Europe for science. So I'd like to hand over to the moderator of this session, which is Magda Di Carli. She's the head of unit and deputy director at the European Commission's RTD. Welcome, Magda.
Thanks a lot for the... Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here with you this afternoon. I'm very happy as well that we follow up on a very interesting session that ties very closely to the discussion today. Because when in the ERA Act we look at the framework conditions for researchers, we could look at openness, we look at mobility, of course we look at also Choose Europe. I'm head of a unit, in fact, in DG Research and Innovation. I will be moderating this session, but of course not alone. I have people to be moderating, and I ask them to kindly come on stage immediately and take a seat. So it is Professor Manuel Hayter. He shouldn't need any introduction, but please, Manuel. So, former Minister for Science, Technology and Higher Education of Portugal, and then, as you know, also chair of the expert group evaluating Horizon Europe, and currently professor at the Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisboa. So thanks a lot, and he will deliver a keynote speech, but I let you sit in for the moment, and I invite you, I invite as well two researchers that came from outside Europe and are now in Europe. So it's Andrew Michael Liebold, Chief Scientist at the Czech University of Life Science in Prague. Thank you. And I will say something more about you when the time comes. And last but not least, Ana Paula Mendoza, a senior researcher at the University of Padova. So thank you very much. So before entering into the discussion, it's a short session, so I will, but I want to say a few words on that. First of all, when we are looking at Choose Europe, we are talking about a small, let's say, ideas, but potentially with a lot of impact. We are looking at making Europe the place where researchers from across the world would feel they can do their best work. Easy, very easy. No, it's not, but we are not unprepared, and there has been a lot of work done in this sense, but the momentum has come to make it visible. And why there is this momentum? First of all, as you know, and as you probably noticed, research and innovation is really at its heights in the political agenda. President von der Leyen last week in the State of the Union spoke about science, research and innovation as one of the most valuable goods we have. And just yesterday at the opening of this conference, she mentioned talent as one of the three main areas where the Commission and the EU is really committed to perform. Because talent, of course, means people, and we know that science and researchers are key for that. But the second point is that this small, let's say, initiative and these messages is a moment now that they will be very much heard. And this is because the R&I is not at the same high level of the political agenda everywhere. And we know very well that outside as well, in other parts of the world, this is not the case. And there are researchers that in fact have restriction in the academic freedom when there is political pressure or instability in funding. That's why our message that is come to Europe because there are certain conditions and you can do your best work is very likely to be heard. But just 4 other points I want to highlight on the initiatives before giving the floor to Manuel. when we look at this initiative, we have to consider that it's not only EU initiative, because we heard what the EU is doing, the Commission is doing. This is a joint venture with member states. And yesterday we checked, actually this morning, with my colleagues, Slaven, on the Euraccess, where we have published all the initiatives from the member states. There are 75 initiatives from the member states that are looking at attracting talents through different calls. We are speaking about scholarship for young graduates, multi-million euro research professorship, programs that welcome scientists at risks and also that strengthen ties with the diaspora. So this is the first element. So it's not Europe, it's not only Commission, it's not EU, it is with the member states. The second message is not only about money. We have heard about the 500 million package, but it's more than that. So we have also these initiatives triggering reforms as well, and we know how much they are needed, and probably Professor Hayter will be mentioning that as well. So, of course, reforms, one amongst the others as well is, for instance, the visa strategy in 25 that will be probably, we are working on, and they will be, in fact, help also circulation of talents. And this is because we don't want scientists, of course, to be to have the hardest test to be for them the visa. So something else it's important is not about attract only, but it's retaining. This has been mentioned several times. All the calls that are out, for instance, are for all researchers. And the fourth and last point, this is not an initiative in isolation. This is looking at researchers, of course, but there are other initiatives linked to that. You heard today the Choose Europe for Life Science. Yesterday was Choose Europe for Startup and Scale-Up. So it is a brand, and this is because we want that being researchers, innovators, or entrepreneurs, Europe wants to be the place where talent can flourish. Having said that, and I think these are 4 key points that we need to keep in mind, I will, just before inviting Professor Hayter to talk, tell you that we want to hear from you as well. And that's why we are launching a Slido now, but we will look at your answers at the end of the sessions and getting reactions from the speakers. So here it is. And the question is, what do you think is the EU's strongest advantage for researchers? So this is, again, looking at what is a factor that for you is a pull factor. Commissioner Sarajeva was speaking about a magnet for talents. So what are these factors for the magnet of talents? All right, so without further ado, I invite Professor Hayter on the podium, please. And we will hear from you your insightful speech. Thank you.
Magda, thank you so much, and the organizers for this invitation. Choose Europe. Choose Europe is an opportunity, and it is more than ever an opportunity, because we know that Europe is the most robust and the most reliable zone at the world level, and also the most efficient per the resources involved due to our the diversity. But the question is, how can we make this opportunity a real issue within Europe? We have just listened from Commissioner Zeraev that the number of applications to the European Research Council has grown as never before. 5 times proposals from researchers currently in the United States. The Marie Skłodowska reactions are increasing the number of applications never before. So I try to address this question. How can we make this opportunity a reality in the European context? And I want to start with 2 very brief remarks. First and foremost, Choose Europe must be about the quality of jobs, and above all, the quality of jobs for the young and the future generations. And this is not new. The Commission Expert Group on the Economic and Social Impact of Research, ISAR, for the last 3 years have produced many reports by Andrea Renda et al. That clearly show the need for Europe to adopt the quality of jobs in science policy in particular, but in general in industrial policy. So we know the diagnosis. My second remark is that Choose Europe is essentially about researchers, but more than ever about the quality of the work in the research community, certainly in academia, in research institutions, but also in company. And we should understand what this means. First of all, we should be very proud of Europe in the last 20 years. Now, researchers from the census of 2021 cover more than 1% of the European labor force. We all are more than 2 million researchers. In 2011, it was less than 1.4 million. And most of you may remember, as I do well, 20 years ago, in 2004, Philippe Busquin, Commissioner Busquin, launched this challenge when Europe was losing researchers. And again, by that time, the report on Europe needs more scientists was critical. And we have done it. We have increased the attraction for young generations to do research and innovation. But at the same time, the Commission data clearly shows that we have been affected over the last 15 years of a tremendous brain drain, particularly to the United States. Many European regions from Central and Southern Europe, from Eastern Europe, has lost thousands of young adults. And we are facing, over the last 15 years, a tremendous brain drain to the United States. So we need to understand that to make this opportunity a reality, it is not just an academic or a technocratic issue. It's a serious political issue because, above all, we have understood in Europe, in comparison to other regions worldwide, that also populist movements and anti-science movements have attracted the support of young adults. So this has become also a true political issue. And we need to remember 5 years ago, the Council, the decision on the research careers was already intended to this. In 2022, the manifesto on the early research careers promoted to the Institute for Science in Europe was again an alert and a very important alert. So we don't need more diagnosis. The diagnosis hasn't been done. We need certainly, and actually following Mario Draghi yesterday, to align, to act, and to accelerate Choose Europe for Europe. And again, we don't need more diagnosis because, among others, we have two very important reports in recent years. About 10 years ago, the Science Europe, together with Eurodoc, has done a survey of about 109 funding schemes throughout Europe at the European and national level, and clearly identify the prevalence of short-term funding schemes with an increasing dependence of institutions, particularly academic research, but also small firms on short-term projects, and the adoption in Europe of a bad practice where young adults and young researchers have been contracted essentially by the time duration of the project. And we need to abandon that practice. More recently, like last year, the CESAR Research Career Survey, a unique initiative around about 24 different and leading European universities, including a few case studies, have clearly shown that we have still unacceptable behaviors in many institutions, although there is a will, although there is a strong will in many institutions, particularly in this type universities, to change. And the recommendations were very clear, threefold. We need a co-funding mechanism, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel because we have the existing Marie Skłodowska-Curie co-funding mechanism that could and should be significantly enlarged, and there are good news about that through the proposal for FP10. We need certainly additional co-funding from national and regional authorities, public and private, and we need also as well at institutional level, certainly in academia, certainly in research institutions, but also in SMEs above all, a new attitude to foster the quality of research jobs, particularly for young adults. And this is the life of future generations. We are not speaking about us. We are speaking about making Europe the best place in the world for our sons and the sons of our sons. And we need to choose Europe as a strong financial and institutional commitment to make it happen and to get better jobs, particularly for research, but for industry and for society in general. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manuel. Really very inspiring. You were, in fact, identifying the challenges, telling us about the challenges. So what is indeed, amongst what you mentioned as well, the important opportunity for Europe to strengthen its role as a place where researchers can come, stay, and thrive?
We know that we need more and better careers. It is unacceptable that in any region in Europe, a young, excellent researcher may take more than 20 or 25 years to get the top of an academic or a research career. It is unacceptable what we now today have data, the Commission data, on brain drain outside of Europe. So if there is now a will to come to Europe, we need to do it. I understand your statement actually similar to Commissioner Zeraev. Money does not solve everything, but money is very important.
Of course.
Money is critically important in this case, and we need really a strong co-fund mechanism, and again, don't need to reinventing the wheel. We have the Marie Skłodowska-Curie co-funding mechanism. The current proposal enlarged it together with the doubling of ERC, but also it has become very clear from also Mario Draghi yesterday. It is not enough. And so we need certainly the European co-funding mechanism, the national and regional co-funding, and we need an institutional commitment to provide better jobs for the young generations and to start with the research community. So better jobs need funding and need an institutional commitment for career development.
Indeed. Okay. No, very well understood. And in fact, I think there is a lot of mobilization around that. I will move to the lady, if you don't mind. So it's Ana Paula Mendoza, biomedical researcher with over 15 years of experience across Brazil, Germany, and Italy. So you are a senior researcher at the University of Padova, chair of the Italian chapter of the Marie Curie Alumni Association, and an active voice in advancing gender equality and transparency in science. Also, I like to remind the audience that your work has ranged from brain metabolism to treatments for rare eye diseases, and you have been recognized internationally, including as one of the Female Science Talents 2024, a Life Ambassador 2022 by eLife Science Publication, and Woman in Higher Education Fellow 2025. So it's an honor to have you in the panel, and we are really looking forward to hearing your story. Thank you. It's a bit of a reality check of what we have been telling until now, and to see, is it really like that?
I hope we can really say everything that you expected me to say. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's very important to share my experience, and I hope I can influence people to apply for the Choose Europe with my experience. So as she said, I have experience in Germany. I did one part of my PhD in Germany, and then I came here, I came to Italy as a Marie Curie fellow. I completely agree with what Manuel said about research and development needs money. Unfortunately, it's a very expensive activity. And thinking about careers for the future, it is essential because we are here talking about innovation. And it is impossible to talk about innovation and not thinking about the scientists. We are leading the innovation. It doesn't matter in Europe, in North America, in South America, it doesn't matter. We are leading innovation, and we need to think about better careers for us. And here in Europe, what surprised me when I arrived here, first in Germany and then later in Italy, it was basically the collaborative aspect you have in science. So to share ideas and to be willing to share ideas and knowledge and resources. And also the ability to relocate, the mobility that most of the programs that you mentioned, they always support about the mobility. This can brings more perspective to the scientists and makes more people more open-minded and make better professionals. As he was saying about make better careers for scientists, one part here in Europe, in Science Europe, made me a big difference for me. It was the MCAA, the association which is an association of researchers, fellows, and alumni. We are more than 22,000 people, members, and we can share the same values and the same challenges together, and it creates a great community. Nowadays, it is impossible, for example, to think about buying a product. If a person is buying a product, this person is thinking about being part of a community. This is how it works. A researcher, when we are joining a program, or we are joining another country, or we are joining an association, we want to be part of a community as well. And the MCAA makes this part, support your career, and you are not making a solo journey. So I think all these elements made me to stay here and to choose Europe to make my science and my scientific project.
Thanks a lot. Fascinating. If you have to choose one thing in particular that makes really this added value to come to Europe, what would that be? And it's different that you don't find them in other parts.
Yeah, okay. So an important value that you have here is citizen science. I think the fact that you can bring people in science is fundamental. Like participate, for example, or even participate in dialogues. I participated in the implementation dialogue with the Commissioner of the Innovation yesterday, and the fact that you can hear the voice of scientists as stakeholders, it is essential. As she said, we know what we face, and we know how we can make it better. So hear scientists as stakeholders. Bring people as in the citizen science or with science communication. It is real-world problems. We understand we are talking to people. I work with life science, and it's great to talk with patients that I know will be impacted by the research I am doing. So perhaps this kind of bringing people to science is the #1 fact that it brings a lot of value for my scientific career and perhaps the scientific career for others.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your insight. And you have a spontaneous applause. So we move to you. Andrew, you are Chief Scientist at the Forest Invasion Synthesis Center, so I had to read it, at the Czech University of Life Science in Prague. Before moving to Europe, you spent decades as a research entomologist with the US Forest Service. Your work has focused on the ecology and management of biological invasions and the dynamics of insect outbreaks, issues with major global relevance. So please tell us about your story. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for inviting me to be part of this, this panel, and I'm actually really happy to share my experiences as an American scientist making the transition from the US to Europe. I've been working at the Czech University of Life Sciences for about 8 months now, so a relatively short time. And before that, for many years, I was a research scientist with the U.S. Department of Agriculture or Forest Service, in that period, I did many things, but my motivation for coming here was really motivated just with the idea of doing something different. I think that for us as scientists, many times, we always like to do different things. We like to work on different problems and solve different things, and so just making the move to Europe and interacting with more Europeans was attractive to me. And my research focuses on the ecology and management of biological invasions in forests. And so I focus on things like insects and plant pathogens and invasive plants that invade forests. And this is a problem that's happening all over the world and having consequential impacts on forest ecosystems. But it's the nature of this type of research is that it demands kind of international collaboration, because very often we go to one part of the world to see what a species, how it interacts with species in its native range, then go to another part of the world to see how it interacts in its invaded range. And because of that, I've had a lot of international collaborations over the years, and I've been a visiting scientist in many research laboratories around the world. So for me, I think it's been a pretty easy transition, making the transition from being a scientist in the US to working in Europe because of those experiences. And my current position at the Czech University of Life Sciences is funded by a Horizon Europe ERA Chair grant that is funded by the part of the Europe Horizon program that focuses on strengthening scientific capacity in the widening countries. And it's quite a large project, and it's focused on building what we call a synthesis center that focuses on the problem of biological invasions in forests. And this concept of a synthesis center is something, it's a relatively new concept that's been applied in the US and a few other parts of the world. And the idea with synthesis ecology is that you don't necessarily always need to go out and collect new data. The idea is that there's a lot of information, theory, data around the world, and it's really by putting that data together in new ways you can make important new discoveries. And so the way our center focuses is we facilitate interdisciplinary teams of scientists and stakeholders who come together at the center for a week, and they collaborate and work on applied problems, and they go back to their institutions, they come back, and through this process, they develop really innovative solutions, interdisciplinary work that is, as in other institutions, this kind of synthesis ecology has been quite successful at developing very good actionable outcomes. And so it's really a fantastic project. Now, my move from the United States to Europe was actually, I made the decision to come here over a year ago. And so, I just started in January. When I started in January, I really had no idea how lucky I was to have made that transition then. Because since the time that I left the United States, it was kind of beyond my imagination. But I mean, to put things bluntly, science is under attack in the US. And I'm sure you read about this in the news, but it's not only a severe decline in funding for research, especially my field, which is environmental research, but also many of my colleagues in the US government research agencies have lost their jobs. And probably the thing that's, I think, having the biggest impact is young scientists. For years, the US has been a place that has attracted young scientists to come and be PhD students, to be postdocs, to be senior scientists. And they've come there because the US has this reputation for scientific excellence and a lot of academic freedom to do what you wanted to do. And I think it's been a huge part of the engine that's made the US successful in its scientific capacity. But now, because of things like visa restrictions and even just the sort of intimidation of foreign nationals in the US, a lot of those people are not coming. And I think this is something that I'm sure we all know that this represents a big opportunity in a way for other parts of the world to attract these young scientists. And certainly here in Europe, I think it's an important opportunity. I mean, having said that, I think unfortunately what's happening in the U.S. is going to have a negative effect. Science is so interconnected globally that it's going to have a negative effect. So just sort of in closing, I can say that I do feel very fortunate about the timing of my move from the U.S. to Europe. I'm actually, my wife and I really like living in Europe. We like the European way of life. In many ways, it's a more sustainable life. We enjoy exploring European culture and all the nooks and crannies of European cities. And I'm also really, I'm really enjoying my time as a European scientist and interacting with other European scientists and quite excited about my work in Prague and continuing that.
No, thanks a lot for your information. So, and there as well, indeed, you made a point, and he's also the actor of a video that has been promoting on Choose Europe. And in the video, you were mentioning, in fact, that the forests are not the same that you find here. But we wanted exactly to know. You mentioned a bit as well. But what is how is the culture different in terms, I don't know, the support and the community you found here in Europe? You mentioned a few things already.
I mean, I think in some ways, science around the world is kind of the same, right? That we all work on the same problems, we all read each other's papers, we collaborate together around the world. So in some ways, it's very much the same exercise. But having said that, I think it's easy to identify there are some differences I noticed in the ways the sort of infrastructure for research in Europe versus the United States. I think, so for example, I've noticed within Europe there's quite a bit of variation in the way universities function. In the United States we have this sort of tenure track system we refer to, whereas I think certainly in many European universities there's probably a higher fraction of people that are not on permanent contracts, and so that's a little different. I think probably salaries of scientists are probably a little lower in Europe than in the United States, although it's hard to make those comparisons because all the costs of living and all the social benefits that are provided in Europe but not in the US. I do think one thing that I have noticed also, which is actually quite interesting, is the way that people in different European cities, different European countries collaborate together. I think is quite effective, and I noticed that in part because of these Horizon Europe programs that promote those kind of things has been very effective, and I think that's maybe a real strength.
Indeed. All right, thanks a lot. So, yeah, we have here for the moment the panel, so very good keynote mentioning the opportunities, and a lot of things you have mentioned is on the collaboration, on the spirits, of the opportunities that you find attracting silence, values, mobility. So there were a few things already that you mentioned, but I think it's now the time to see what the audience thinks about what are the advantages, and looking at the Slido, and I would like to ask you eventually then to react to that. And of course, you are free to react also to what you have heard from colleagues. So this was the question. What do you think is the EU's strongest advantage for researchers? So we see big on the center is freedom. You mentioned, and Andrew mentioned it very, very clearly, academic freedom. Also, Heiter mentioned it. MSCA, stability, quality of life, democracy, diversity, collaboration. So it is, we see that is, as we say, very important that we keep investing, and there is investments there. It's key. There are also, when this has to be accompanied as well by these values. issues that are there, and it seems to be the things that attract mostly researchers. But up to you to tell if you think that there is anything that is surprising you there amongst the different words that you see, something that you think is missing, any comments on this? Yes, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this free survey. Freedom in the center, together with stability and diversity. And these three words definitely are very much the European DNA. But touch on what we have listened from America. Don't take it for granted that it will not arrive in Europe. That is the main reason why we are facing a battleground. And science is a battleground. And in Europe, we need to choose Europe as a strong funded project to make sure that we don't face the same problems like the United States. What we have just listened is not different from we knew, in particular in Germany, in the 1930s, some 90 years ago. So we cannot take it for granted, and we need to really provide better jobs for the young generations. And this is Choose Europe. And there is a need for an adequate funding level, certainly funding to be distributed in a way to stimulate a new institutional behavior and the guarantee of the quality of jobs for the young generations.
Well done. Indeed, not everything is for granted, and we keep to make the effort for that. Andrew, Paola, please, Anna Paola.
I can just chime. Oh,
No,
is it okay? I mean, chime in. It is kind of cool how this freedom comes up so often, which I think it's really true. And I can, again, just anecdotally saying in the U.S., my colleagues, since all this bad stuff has gone down in the last 6 months, it's been an overwhelming sort of traumatic thing to them to be all of a sudden going through their papers and grants and thinking, oh my God, are the words diversity or climate change in any of our documents, and sort of worrying about whether someone's listening in. And it's something it's had a huge effect on productivity, because scientists are traumatized, and when scientists are traumatized, they actually get a lot less work done. So,
Indeed.
yeah.
Indeed.
I want to mention that here there is the quality of life that for sure I love it here. But I want to stress out about the Marie Curie when I applied. So when we start discussing about me participating here, I start thinking about what made me to choose Europe exactly. And I had two options. I already had an opportunity to go to UCLA to make a project with my previous supervisor, and to come here and explore by myself Europe. And I decided to choose Europe, and I will explain you why. When I applied for the Marie Curie, it was during pandemic. Something that I could highlight was that the Marie Curie wasn't a grant for a complete scientist. It was a grant to make you a complete scientist, because it was a lot of topics saying that what can you bring with you here that will make you a better scientist. And so in the end, the Marie Curie, after 2 years of Marie Curie, I can say that I became more than a researcher, but really a professional that even doesn't need to stay only in academia or a research institute, but can work in a public institution or in a private sector, because the Marie Curie thinks about your career and not only your project. It's beyond the lab. So now I can say that I am a researcher, a communicator, a connector, a professional in the end of my Marie Curie fellowship.
Thanks a lot. This is nice. that of course you bring your professionalism to Europe, but this is also helping you to move forward as well in your career and your experience. So we are at the end of that, at the end of our time, almost perfectly on time. I think this has been very insightful. It was very nice to hear a very strong, experienced expert on this, on the matters, and also the reality check with those that have been researchers choosing Europe. I think Choose Europe is in fact highlighting, is putting a spotlight that has increased the visibility on things that we have been already achieved, and you have seen in the list is not only the freedom but also all these values and the infrastructures, it was mentioned, ideas and the mobility, etc. But as also Manuel was mentioning, this is not for granted, and we need to keep working on that, and we are very happy that, as it was mentioned in the previous session, ERA Act can come also in this direction, looking at the researchers, the careers, and trying to make the most of what exists already in Europe, but also to improve. So thank you very much to all of you. It has been extremely interesting, and it's just a matter to continue working on that and to choose Europe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magda. That was a fascinating panel and brutally honest. Very upsetting to hear about the traumatized scientists. Thank you so much for that. If you're more interested in that topic of academic freedom, you can join Signe Razzo and Robert de Caraff at 15:40 in the Silver Hall. Also, the president of the European Innovation Council and the former EU Commissioner Vera Jourova will be taking the stage in the Copper Hall to discuss STEM. I will see you back here at 16:30, 4:30, back here on the main stage for the closing session of the RNI Days. Thank you so much for your attention, and see you then.